Alright, just a quick post-game analysis of a game I just played here. Time control was 10-5 on Lichess, classic game. I'm playing the white pieces, and we have a c3 Sicilian. The whole idea here is to use this c-pawn to support two big pawns in the center. There's a lot of ways he could have played this. The way he chooses is completely fine. It's an acceptable opening. Normally I would push this pawn, and then his whole idea is to build up against this backward pawn in the center with moves like queen and knight, and even this knight will sometimes shift over here. But for whatever reason I wanted to do something a little different. I played knight here, which is fine, but it gives me this isolated structure. So the whole idea of an isolated pawn is it is a long-term disadvantage, but you gain a little more rapid development, a little more space and flexibility with your pieces. Oftentimes one idea is to push it at the right time to open things up even more. So pretty normal stuff here. I have a couple options. I could come back, but I just take because I have an idea of, maybe getting a quick trap on this guy. So now the whole idea is if bishop here, we trap the queen. So it's a pretty neat trap to remember. Everyone's probably, if you play enough, it'll happen to you or you'll do it to someone. I like this game because there's some good tactics at the end that are pretty interesting. He could have played bishop check here though, and this is probably the best move because it stops the whole idea. I'd have to block with the bishop or awkwardly move my king, and then he doesn't really lose any tempos. But he saw the trap and he moves his queen back, and now I'm kind of happy with that because I seem to have gained a tempo there. Going back just a second too, he could have even potentially taken with this pawn, and now he doesn't have to worry about that. And although he doesn't have a safe place to castle, he can use this file potentially, and it wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. But as it turns out, I gain a quick tempo. I castle. This is the correct move. If he'd played here, he'd be vulnerable to some quick attacks on his king. The classic bishop sacrifice. This move I didn't really like from him so much. Kind of gets in the way of the knight. I don't know, it wasn't bad though either. Maybe his idea is take, and try to win this pawn eventually, but this would hang. I play bishop here. This is kind of a not best move either, but I thought a long time about this move. I looked at other stuff like knight here, obviously. If knight here and queen takes, I could play knight takes, and if king takes, then I had a bishop check. If I played it all really fast, he might fall for that. But he could just play rook over here after I do that, and even though I have moves like this for protecting the pawn, I didn't really see it as a best option. Let me throw that in the computer real quick and let's see what the computer says. Computer kind of likes it. If take, it does like it, so that is interesting. But I played the more cautious move here. He plays knight out, standard development. I get my rook here, so the whole idea of get on the open file obviously, but I want to drop my bishop back here potentially, so now I have a battery. I can put my queen in front of it, and the bishop, once it's off the back row and the rooks are connected, you can drop it back oftentimes, and you'd still be considered fully developed. The whole idea with the bishops is to just make sure they're not interfering with the rooks. So this is the first interesting move. He plays here just a simple, try to win a pawn, and I just ignore it most of the game because I realize for him to take that pawn, it's one move to take it, and then one move to come back. So it's two tempos for a pawn. Usually that's worth it, but I'm just gonna go for a big kingside attack anyway. So if he wants the pawn, that's fine. So I bring the knight in, and now the idea is to start. Maybe there's an exploit here I can take advantage of if he's not careful. For example, if he took the pawn right away, bishop here is pretty strong. Let's see. Yeah, I mean at this point the game's over. There's no way to really save that. So he just castles, and now I go to work on the king's side. Immediate sack here doesn't work. In some cases it might, but not here. But I go right for it, trying to provoke a weakness. I think better would be to play here. Usually the better defense is to push your f-pawn, because there's a lot of reasons. One is your king has a way of getting out, last worst case scenario, but you also open up the horizontal rank, so that your heavy pieces can get involved and defend laterally the g pawn. So there's a few different reasons, and because these two pawns here basically represent a more solid structure, and the more you can keep them intact, the better usually. You don't want to create any holes in front of your king. So I really was happy to see, or I would have been happy to see this pawn push forward. He plays the knight here. Notice I was threatening a mate in one, so he had to do one of those three moves. The knight here is not a bad move. He wins a tempo, hitting my queen and defending the mate at the same time. I drop back, keeping the pressure. Now he's got to constantly worry about this pressure, so it has a kind of practical advantage in that sense, but it has a strategic advantage as well, in that he at any time I can initiate some sort of threat on his knight if he's not careful, and the game would be over pretty quick. And in fact, that's what he did in the game. He played queen here, and if I give you a few seconds here, can you find the knockout? It's pretty straightforward. We just play knight here, and now the idea is we're forking the queen and knight and rook, really, but he can't take it with this knight, obviously, because he'd get mated. So what can he do, really? All he can do is pretty much nothing. He can't move the queen. If he moves the queen, I just take the knight, and then it's going to be mate anyway. So his best option, if he plays here and I play here, his best option might be to just secure the mate and then just drop his queen. But I gave him the move back, and he played here. Now here's where the computer kind of likes a different approach, and in retrospect it is best. It's just to take and then just start taking advantage of this pin here, now that the queen is off. If he comes here, we've already got shots on his that could potentially work, because remember, he can't come off because of this problem here. But I don't really go for that. I'm going again for this more direct assault, just threatening the knight and then mate. So he has to do something about that. So we provoke this weakness, which I'm happy to finally see. This move the computer didn't really like. Wasn't bad, but my whole idea is I didn't want to bring the knight back to this square because I had an idea of maybe getting on this diagonal later. I don't know. Now I have at least a threat here if he ever comes off this pawn. We're threatening a fork on his king and queen. But the knight's kind of interfering with the queen and the bishop. That's why I didn't want to do it, but I realize he's eventually going to have to come back out. That's why it's not the greatest move. You're basically setting up that knight to leave again. But in the meantime, I liked the equilibrium I've reached in the position, so I finally defend this pawn. Now here again, just taking the rook, and if I could just start exploiting this pin. You know, he can't take with this rook, remember, because I'd check him, so he'd have to take with the queen, and just start taking advantage of this. So the computer still likes me doing that. I didn't really like giving up the tension, but I probably should have looked at that position. So now my idea is to just shift the bishop over here. Now this was a blunder on his part, but I missed it. Again, the tactic was rook takes. He's got two ways to take it, but they both fail. You know, if rook takes here, we win the bishop because he can't take, because we'd fork him. And obviously, if queen takes, we win the bishop. You know, and it's even worse because he's got to move away, and I'm getting this, so it was just game over. But I was so caught up in my my plan to exploit this diagonal that I did miss it. I play bishop here. Now the idea is if bishop takes bishop, pawn takes, now I have a home for this knight. So I have a wedge pawn here, and the idea is to get the knight here with a wedge pawn supporting it and a mate threat here. So it was a decent idea, but obviously not as good as a knockout that I had. He should have taken it, but instead he plays back, and now I realized, you know, as soon as he did that, I knew the game was over because he's let this pin exist, and I can immediately attack this knight. Before the pin was this way, it wasn't nearly as strong. I'm just hitting a piece. It was effective, but now it's devastating. It's game over. This pin is too much, and now the next few moves are all about just building up on the knight. So I immediately hit it. He realized he had to exchange first because all of these threats will come if he lets me build up and then knock him off at the right time. So now he puts his queen on it, but I can hit it again. He can defend it again, so now we got 3 on it, but it is defended 3 times. But we have some pretty cool tactics here. We could play rook here or here, really. Rook here is pretty interesting, or rook here, and just immediately we would win the knight and quickly the game. I did the check first, but it works out the same way. After rook here, it's a pretty cool finish because there's really nothing for him to do. The computer recommends knight here to stop just this mate, and then I would just win the queen, and you know, that's the game. But let's just see real quick what would happen if he took the rook. I could go either way here, bishop or knight. I think I would do the knight's probably a little more forcing. Just kick it off with the check. If bishop takes, and now we have this unstoppable mate threat. And I had already checked that, you know, this mate wasn't available. It's kind of why I gave the check first, just to be safe. And now there's nothing to do, but that would be the only move to stop mate in 1, and game over. So I enjoyed that that final finish. You know, you don't always get to play a nice, almost puzzle-like tactic in to finish your games. So I enjoyed that. Hope you enjoyed that as well.